What is up, friends? Welcome to the first Q&A for the channel, and it's kind of late because I wanted to do it a couple times in the past at different points in the channel, but I'm glad to finally be able to get around to it now, and thank you to all of those who asked questions. I did a community post a couple days ago, if you missed it, where I asked for questions from people, so that's what I'm going to be going through for this, and I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. I will probably bundle a few together, as in if I find one question that's similar to a lot of others, I'll just focus on answering that one specifically because I feel like it'll answer the rest of them. And so I hope that I'll be able to answer the questions as best as I can. And so without further ado, let's get into the first question. With this seemingly big movie interest, how is it that you missed all these huge movies early on in life, and what did you do prior to starting the channel? So I wanted to do this one first because I feel like this is a common question that I see people ask, so I feel like I'd get the biggest one out of the way in the beginning, and there's a couple reasons for it. One is that my family enjoyed movies growing up, but we weren't like religious movie watchers or anything like that, and so for a while I was watching maybe like 15-20 movies a year, maybe, because it wasn't like super high on my priority list. I also loved playing video games and stuff, and so my time was occupied frequently with other things like that. And kind of the second biggest reason that I hadn't seen too much stuff that I've been watching for the channel before I started it is, and I know I've mentioned this quite a bit in the past, that I haven't seen a whole lot of stuff released before the year 2000, and before a couple of years ago when I really started trying to see a lot more stuff released from that time period, even before I started the channel, I'd probably seen maybe like 20 to 30 movies released before the year 2000, because I'd really just been focusing on stuff that was released when I was kind of growing up or when I was an adult. And so obviously not all the movies I've watched for the channel have been before 2000, but that is one of the reasons why some of the major classics, I guess you could say, like The Godfather, Back to the Future, all that stuff, I'd never really watched before. And then the third main reason, I'm going to let those of you watching try and figure it out, because there's a pretty common theme with 90 to 95% of the stuff that I've watched for the channel. And so if any of you figure it out, I will let you know that you got it right in the comments. 2 questions. What is your occupation? Because I was wondering how some YouTubers have so much time to react to videos. And second question, where did you go to college and what did you study? So in answer to the first question, I was doing videography work before I started the channel and through the first couple of months, but at this point this is pretty much my job, and so that's why I focus a whole lot of time into it, which would explain why I in particular am able to react and have the schedule that I do right now. I don't know what everybody else is doing, so I can only speak for myself, but as far as what I did in college, I am a bit of a Dennis Reynolds in that my bachelor's was in psychology, and I feel like as far as movie watching, it helps me a little bit in being able to understand characters or try and find meanings beyond the scene. I may not be the best at it, but I feel like it's definitely helped me out a little bit there. What's your background, if any, on film? You're great at picking up on themes, symbolism, and the way camera work, editing choices go along with those themes. Well, first of all, thank you. Sometimes I don't really feel like I am that great because I feel like I'm wrong about a lot of stuff, but that's kind of you to say. But my background in film is, obviously I mentioned before that I did videography work, and I've done video related stuff and editing for about 10 years prior to starting the channel, and I've worked in things like live TV production and whatnot, which you wouldn't think that live TV production, whether it's sports or studio shows, would help very much in understanding film itself, but it surprisingly relates a lot. And so that's kind of how I got a handle on different techniques for camera work and how all the different aspects, audio and things like that, go into making a good production. And so I feel like that's kind of why I'm able to pick up on those things, maybe. But again, I don't consider myself an expert or anything by any means. I just try and say what comes to mind, and very occasionally it ends up being maybe a well-constructed sentence, but I appreciate your comment. What are some movies you have seen on the channel that you did not like as much? Because it seems as if you enjoy every movie you react to. Part of the reason I think I'm enjoying most of the things I'm watching is because they're all chosen by polls, and so it's not like any terrible films are sneaking through the cracks because people wouldn't vote for them. But on the other hand, I usually go into a film wanting to enjoy it or trying to get any sort of good experience out of it. I usually don't go into things with a preemptive hate for it or dislike for it. And even if a movie's not the best, I try and make the most out of it, because if I just straight up dislike something, then I feel like I would have wasted my time. And so I don't really have too many movies that I've disliked for the channel, but I will have a video coming up here shortly that will go through more specifics that if you're interested in, you can check out. Does your arm get tired holding the microphone in front of your mouth the entire movie? Ever consider getting a microphone stand or a new setup so that the microphone won't be in the picture? The mic I use weighs like -2 pounds, so it's really not that heavy, so it's not a problem for me to go through movies or shows holding it. And if I can make it through 7 Samurai's runtime without my arm getting tired, I feel like there's nothing that could stop me at this point. But I feel like this feels the best for me. I don't see myself ever changing it, at least for a while, because it feels kind of the most natural. And if I didn't hold a mic while I was watching, I wouldn't really know what to do with my hands, and so I feel like it gives me a comfortable position to have while watching it. Everyone can see you're very passionate about filmmaking based on your commentary in the videos. Are you interested at all in creating films, short films, and or pursuing that line of work as a career? I've actually already made some short films in the past and been a part of a number of different short films and stuff, so yes, I love doing that, and I want to definitely do that more down the road, whether it's uploading films that I make to the channel here or just maybe pursuing a more significant role in the future. We'll see what happens, but the answer to your question is yes. Do you have any long-term goals for a career other than a YouTube channel? You've cultivated such an amazing channel and fan base in such a short amount of time. I feel like someday you're going to move on to things even bigger than this. Well, thank you for your comment. That was very nice of you to say. I'm glad that there's a good community here. That's mostly just credit to you guys. I'm just a catalyst for that to happen, so I wouldn't give me too much credit there. But going kind of off what I've mentioned before, I'm still very passionate about videography and filmmaking type work, and so whatever I do beyond this channel would definitely be surrounding that kind of work. At least I would try to make it that kind of work, but I don't know exactly what the future holds. Obviously, with years like last year, there's not too much you can do to predict the future, and so I just kind of try and do the most with what I've got at the moment. Favorite movie you've reacted to on the channel? So I'm not going to answer this one specifically because I mentioned before that there's a video coming up that goes into the specifics on how I feel towards each movie that I've watched, and that will definitely help answer your question, and hopefully in the next day or two that will be up. Why, since the start of your channel, there is a high level of quality? Like, do you work on a job that involves editing or TV? Since the start of your channel, the audio has been super clean and clear. Well, thanks. I'm glad that it's come across well. I definitely try to make the watching and listening experience good for people, but it kind of goes in line with what I said before, that I've done video and editing work for about 10 years before I started the channel, and so the transition to the technical side of making YouTube videos wasn't a huge shift or anything. I just used equipment that I already had for other work around, and the editing I was already familiar with. Just kind of getting a new handle on editing reaction videos was the only change. The biggest change was just being in front of the camera, because that was something that I'd never done before, and so for me that was definitely the hardest transition into doing reacting and stuff, was just knowing what to say and being comfortable with myself in front of the camera. What movies, shows would you wish people would stop asking you to watch that you have no interest in? Luckily, I don't feel like I've had this problem too much. There's not really one that people relentlessly ask constantly. There's a couple that people ask about a lot, but it's stuff that I was already interested in, and so luckily that hasn't been a problem for me so far, but we'll see what happens in the future. Are you into video games at all? If so, what do you like like to play. What are a few favorite games off the top of your head? I do. I haven't done a whole lot in the past couple years, but throughout my life I've always loved playing video games, and I would say my top game series or kind of game trilogies of all time would be the original 3 Gears of War and the first 3 Mass Effect games, which can't wait for the new Mass Effect. I really hope it's good, but those are definitely my favorite series. Love them to death, have such great stories and gameplay as well. But I would like to play a lot more games, especially some that I've missed over the years, and so if that's something you guys would like to watch in the future, me going through some games, definitely let me know. Tell us more about you. Age, hobbies other than movies, job, relationships. Let us know you a bit better as far as you are comfortable with, of course. So I am 28 years old. I don't know if that's higher or lower than what some of you were expecting, but definitely getting dangerously close to 30, which is a scary thought, and feeling it physically the past few years for sure. My hobbies really do center a lot around movies and TV shows. I would love going to the theater, love watching shows and stuff, whether by myself, with friends. Hanging out with friends is another big hobby. I love basketball, although I haven't been playing a bunch lately, but that's probably my number one hobby outside of movies throughout my life is basketball, playing, watching, all the above. So right now, definitely the best time of year outside of the Halloween season, the playoff season in the NBA. So I'm enjoying the games there right now. Job, I've already kind of covered, and relationships, there's not much to cover there. So hopefully that answers your question. Are there any movies or genre you will not watch? Example, the Human Centipede trilogy. I don't know if any of you have watched the Exploring the Disturbing Movie Iceberg video from Wendigoon, I believe is his channel. Great video if you haven't seen it, but I feel like a lot of the stuff on there would be movies that I would avoid watching, just the really gross or disturbing stuff like that. And so other than that, I feel like I'm open to pretty much most things. Roughly how long does it take to edit a video for a 50-minute show? Better Call Saul, Fargo, Breaking Bad, etc. So there's 2 phases to this. Obviously, we've got the full-length reaction for Patreon, and then we've got the YouTube edit. And the full-length reactions, I go through and I make sure all the audio's leveled perfectly and stuff like that, and so that just takes about the time it takes to watch an episode. So whatever the episode length is, that's just the time it takes me to do the full length, go through each of the audio moments where I'm speaking and level those and whatnot. And then the YouTube videos, that's where most of the heavy editing takes place, and so usually it takes, I'd say, about 2 hours longer than whatever I'm watching to do a YouTube edit. So if it's a show and it's an hour long, just under an hour long, takes me about 3 hours to get a YouTube edit ready. If it's a movie, I know you asked specifically about TV shows, but if it's a movie, if it's like a 2 hour long movie, it usually takes between 4 and 5 hours, sometimes 6 hours, depending on how the edit's going, but that is hopefully enough to give you an idea. Do you plan on reacting to any Netflix originals like Dark, Black Mirror, Stranger Things, etc., if you haven't already seen them? Well, I have seen all of Black Mirror and Stranger Things up to this point. Really hope they release more Black Mirror because I love that show, but with whatever they come out with in the future for both of those shows, obviously Stranger Things already coming out with another season, definitely would love to react to those for the channel. And Dark is one that I've been interested in for a while, just since people have mentioned it. Sounds like a really interesting show. Where would you rank Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul with other shows you've watched? Unlike movies, it's very difficult for me to kind of rank TV shows because I feel like with the length and the styles and the characters, it just gets very difficult to compare different things together. But so far, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are some of the best shows I've ever watched. I know I've mentioned that a bunch in them, and so I know that's not like a direct specific answer, but I feel like by the time Better Call Saul is done, both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul would probably be in my top 10 of all time easily. What kind of music do you listen to? Any favorite bands or artists? So probably to no surprise, my favorite music to listen to is just really movie soundtracks and TV show soundtracks. That's about what I listen to 95 to even 99% of the time. I really don't listen to too much else, partly just because I love the soundtracks and I feel like it stimulates my mind a lot more than other regular music. Not that I have any problem with any other music, and if there's any of you doubting that, thinking that I'm just saying it because of the channel, I'll show you my top of the decade from Spotify, which as you can see is absolutely dominated by Hans Zimmer and other soundtracks. And on that you'll also see my favorite non-soundtrack artist, which any of you who watched the Lost in Translation video already know this, but Eden is my favorite artist. Love his music. Definitely recommend him to any of you who may not have heard him before, but that's really the scope of what I listen to most of the time. If Brandon only likes movies, what does Brandon love in life? You, Jake. Can you give us a tour of your setup, or at least can you show us the other side of the room? My room's actually a studio set where there is only one side of the room, but in all seriousness, there is a video, the first one on the channel, the collection video. At the very end of that, it also goes through my room setup, and not a whole lot has changed since I first shot that, and so that'll give you a good idea of what it looks like. What are your top 5 or top 10 favorite movies of all time, and are you planning to get socials like Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxed? Well, I can tell you I have no plans to get Twitter because I am very anti-Twitter. I don't use a whole lot of social media in general outside of the channel. I've maybe made one post on any social media in like the last 5 years, I feel like, and so I'm not really active there in general. I don't use it a whole lot, but maybe at some point I might make something for the channel just as a way to connect more, or just in case something happens and I need to let people know what's going on. And as far as Letterboxd, I made one a couple years back, I believe now, and I haven't really shared it much with the channel just because I feel like my rating system is very specific to me, and if people went on there they might be confused about some of the ratings I give stuff. But maybe at some point I'll share it, but I feel like I want my channel more to be specifically about the experience rather than a specific number. But if you guys just want it specifically to see what I've seen in the past, maybe I'll share that at some point so you can see. And to answer the first part of your question, my favorite film is Interstellar. I believe I mentioned that a couple times, even way back in the first video on the channel. Absolutely love that film. Definitely probably the one that inspired me to get deeper into film and really develop the love I have for film at this point. Just an incredible experience. And the rest of my top 5, number 2 is The Bourne Ultimatum. That's the most watched movie of my life. I've seen that movie so many times, my favorite action movie, and the whole trilogy is fantastic. Might be an unorthodox pick for a top 5, but I absolutely love that movie, one of my favorites. My third favorite, you're gonna notice a theme here in a second, but Inception, also by Christopher Nolan. One of my favorite theater experiences, the first time I saw that in the theater and everyone gasped at the end credits coming up. I still remember that very well. And the fourth is The Dark Knight, another Christopher Nolan movie. What a surprise. He's my favorite director for a reason, but I feel like that's just a perfect movie experience. Love that one. And then number 5, you would already know this if you're familiar with the channel, but Arrival is my 5th favorite. What are your favorite movie and TV show of all time? Also, what is the highest quality TV show movie that you've watched on your channel so far? So obviously just got through my favorite movie, and if you've been watching the channel for a while, I would hope that you know my favorite TV show by now, but it is 24, and it's been that way for quite a while, and it's evolved even just beyond the show at this point to just all the memories I have of watching it with people, whether it was watching it live with my family when it was airing or just showing it to friends over the years. It's just such a great show for me. And as far as the highest quality TV show that I've watched for the channel so far, I feel like that would be way too difficult for me because pretty much everything I've watched has been absolute gold. But as I mentioned before, your movie question will be answered soon in another video. You have watched so many TV shows and movies now. What would be your dream cast? Make it for any genre you want. I'm just interested. This is a fun question, but also a pretty difficult one to answer. I feel like anytime I have to share my opinions about stuff, it's a difficult one to answer though. But if I were to pick a dream cast, Jake Gyllenhaal would be number one on that list. Obviously, he's my favorite actor, but I also feel like I'd like to see him act in a movie with Jon Bernthal, because I don't believe they've ever been in a movie together, but Jon Bernthal is also one of my favorite actors, and so those two together I feel like would be elite. And then the rest of the cast you could fill out with maybe Jessica Chastain or Amy Adams. Either of them, I think both of them are great actresses. And then if he were still alive, I would throw in Philip Seymour Hoffman as either a part of the main cast or a supporting character, because he's one of my favorite actors ever, and very sad that he left us when he did, but I think that cast would be excellent. And for the genre, I feel like you could do anything with those actors and actresses, but maybe something along the lines of like thriller or sci-fi, because those are genres that I really gravitate towards. Are you planning on watching Invincible on Amazon? Highly recommend it. I am. Yep. I don't know when it'll come up, but hopefully soon, because I've heard a lot of people say good things about it. Do you ever get burned out from watching all these movie shows and having to react to them? If so, how do you motivate yourself to keep on doing it on a consistent basis? I try to make sure I give myself time to relax and do other stuff, whether it's with friends or playing games, whatever it may be, outside of reacting and doing this stuff, because if I do it too consistently for too long, then it definitely overwhelms me. Luckily, I don't feel like I've had too bad of burnout so far, but there's definitely been days where I just don't want to watch anything or react to anything. Part of what helps me to maintain my schedule though is I am a bit of a workaholic, so if I do get my mind set on something, then it's hard for me to stop working on it. And so I feel like for the nature of creating content for a channel, it helps me there, but mentally sometimes it's not the most beneficial thing. What are some of the best memories you've had with movies while growing up? So the very first theater experience I had from start to finish was the re-release of the original Star Wars, and according to my parents, I could not take my eyes off the screen the entire time, and I still remember bits and pieces of that experience, but definitely one of my favorite memories as a kid, and spawned my love for Star Wars, but also an early love for movies that would obviously grow later in life, and so I feel like that's my favorite memory. A production company wants to bring back a Wild West type of movie. Who's the director, and who are the three main actors you'd want? So I'm not the most experienced with Wild West type movies, but I feel like I would love to see Denis Villeneuve, who is my second favorite director, kind of my 1B favorite director next to Christopher Nolan, direct a movie like that, maybe written by Taylor Sheridan, because he's kind of the closest I've gotten to a true Wild West type writer, and his movies are great. So that combo alone would be enough to spend whatever amount of money to go see it. And I feel like my three main cast members for a movie of that genre, I would choose Javier Bardem, Christoph Waltz, and Frances McDormand. I feel like they would be really good together in that genre. I would like to know more about your microphone setup. Well, I use a Zoom H5, and that's about it. I just do a little bit of editing in post on the audio, but other than that, that's all there is to it. What is your guilty pleasure movie, despite it being average or just plain bad? I feel like at this point I could consider the sequel trilogy my guilty pleasure, considering the way people feel about that, but a more maybe normal choice would be, I don't know, it's taken me a while to think of one, but Daddy Daycare, I guess, is just a random one my family and I have enjoyed for a while. Just a dumb, silly movie, but we've always had a good time watching it, so I feel like that's the only one that I could think of that's rated pretty poorly. Everywhere else, IMDb, whatever, but we have a good time with it. What was a milestone movie that sparked your love for movies or made you realize something profound about movies? Well, I kind of mentioned it before. Interstellar, I feel like, was a big one for me because my mind was just completely changed after watching that for the first time, and so I feel like that was the biggest one, and then everything else has been a little bit more of a gradual evolution over time. Thoughts on Game of Thrones as a whole? This is always a fun question to talk about on the internet, but I absolutely love Game of Thrones, easily in my top 10 shows currently, and I actually did not hate season 8 as much as everyone else. It didn't ruin the show for me or anything like that. May not be as good as the other seasons. May have felt a bit rushed there at the end. I would have loved to have more stuff, but didn't taint the show's image in my mind. And so for me, I still love the show and gladly would rewatch it anytime. And I also should add, just in case, that I did watch all of it after it already aired, so I didn't have to wait a long time between episodes. I didn't have any of the streaming issues that I know people had, especially during the Battle of Winterfell episode, and so that may have helped contribute to my experience as well. Any thoughts on covering The Sopranos? It's a long show, I know, but it truly is a legacy show, and there is basically no reactions of it on YouTube. Yeah, I definitely would like to check it out at some point. It's one that I wanted to see before I started the channel, and so we'll see when it happens. Definitely one that will come up eventually in the future though. What aspect of film do you seem to care about, appreciate the most? Example, cinematography, acting, directing, writing, etc. That's a tough one because when any of those aspects are done to perfection, I feel like I notice or pick up on it. But I think soundtrack is a major part that I always pick up on because, as I mentioned, love listening to soundtracks and movie, TV show music, and so whenever there's some of that that's good in a show or a movie, I feel like I always pick up on that. But besides that, I would say cinematography is probably what I would recognize the most out of those, because as someone who's done videography and camera work in the past for various things, I feel like I can relate a lot more to the effort that would go into something like that. But not that I could do it by any means, because there's no way I could pull off stuff that they're doing in movies and shows, but I feel like I have a better understanding of what it takes to get good shots like that. So hopefully that answers your question. What's one movie that you have already seen outside of YouTube that you wish you could have saved for a reaction on the channel? Well, probably Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Marvel, all those, because those are definitely the reaction cash cows. If you haven't seen those, you're set for life as far as views and whatnot go. But besides that, I mean pretty much most movies, because I enjoy sharing my reactions with you all, and it would be fun to experience stuff for the first time with other people. But I, at the same time, feel like if I hadn't seen what I had before the channel or had the experiences with movies, then I may not have come into this with the mindset that I have, being more maybe analytical, I guess, about stuff. And so I don't really have regrets about watching stuff before the channel. You do a lot of stuff that is requested by fans. Have you thought about reacting to something each week that you are just generally interested in, even if nobody else is? I actually just started doing that recently. Every 2 weeks, I pick one of the 2 movies that week that is just one that I've wanted to see. It may have been one that people already suggested, or it may just be one that I've wanted to check out for a while. Like Nobody, obviously, was on the channel recently. That's just one that I wanted to see myself, and then there's some more coming up here soon that you'll notice. A bit personal, but do you have a girlfriend or a secret relationship we don't know about? So I've been hiding it for a while, but I feel like this is as good of time as any. But yes, I am dating Alexandra Daddario. If you had to interview one character not actor, from a show, movie, who would it be? I would interview Charlie from Always Sunny. I mean, you've picked about the most interesting subject in media right there, so it's hard to beat that. But as far as characters go, I feel like it'd be really interesting to interview Amy Adams' character from Arrival, not just because it's one of my favorite movies, but just because of her experience in that. I feel like you could just gain so much knowledge and have your mind completely opened. I won't say much more than that if you haven't seen the movie, but I feel like that would be a fascinating person to learn from. Is it awkward for you that some people identify you as some kind of their buddy and get onto a personal level without really knowing who you are? I personally enjoy movies with you, but I don't really know your character or interact with you, so I keep it simple. But I could imagine some people cross a certain line of personal space. Not at all. I feel like that's the intention of what I'm doing here, is to feel like you're watching something with a friend to see their reaction, because that's how I feel towards other people who do reaction videos a lot of the time, and how I feel towards friends in real life. It's kind of the similar experience, and so I have no issue with that at all, and I'm glad that people are getting that experience. I think that's really cool. What actor would you like to meet the most? I think Matthew McConaughey would be pretty cool to meet, because he seems like a very interesting personality in real life. That or Jack Black, because Jack Black does not give a crap what anybody thinks about him. I respect that a lot. Man's just out there living his best life, so I feel like either of those people would be very entertaining to meet for very different reasons. How do you always remain so lax and soft-spoken? Where does it come from? You're like a monk. Well, I don't know if I've ever been called like a monk before, but I guess that's a good thing. And it's just my personality. I guess I'm not trying to do anything different for the videos. This is just how I am normally. If anything, I am more lax in real life because I'm not trying to talk for a video or anything like that, and so it's just my normal personality. If you had to choose a position job in the filmmaking business, what would it be? Out of all of the positions I've worked for, like live TV and stuff, I've done camera work, I've done technical directing, if you know what that is, and directing and all of that, and my favorite out of all of those is directing, because I feel like that's where my creativity can kind of blossom and grow the most, and where I feel most engaged with the work that I'm creating or helping out with. And so I feel like in the film world as well, that's what I would love to do the most, is just direct. Have you ever thought about making video essays on the topic of movies? Since you have the editing skills and the knowledge about film theory, I believe it'd be a perfect fit to react to a movie and then analyze certain aspects of it. I think that'd be really cool, but I don't know if I'm necessarily cut out for that type of thing, because I think the people who do those video essays, which I also love watching, are geniuses. They're very articulate, and if any of you have watched my videos, I'm not always the most articulate, so maybe down the road at some point, but they also take a lot of time and energy, and just with my schedule right now, I simply can't fit that in. And so maybe down the road that'd be a fun thing to pursue. Would you ever consider reacting playing video games that have a heavy narrative focus? Absolutely. I know I brought it up earlier, but if that's something that people would like to watch along for, definitely let me know. I don't know if I would do something like start a Twitch, or if I just record it and upload some edits of it on here or something like that, but it's something that I've definitely thought about a few times. Is there any piece of media that consistently gets you emotional every time you view, listen, or play it? Well, I feel like I can add Green Mile to that list, but before the channel, I think one that's always kind of hit me in the feels every time I watch it is It's a Wonderful Life. Definitely almost a yearly tradition for me to watch that around the Christmas time, holiday season, and it always hits me when it gets to the end, so definitely that one. Are you still going to do the rest of the Harry Potter reactions? At some point I definitely want to, because obviously they're great movies, super entertaining to watch, and I think I mentioned in the past though that the reason I stopped at the time was because I'm just focusing more on stuff that I haven't seen. So if I find in the future that I've run out of stuff to watch amazingly, then I'll probably go back and react to more things that I have seen, or maybe sooner than that as well. What helped you make that decision? Record myself and put it out on the internet. Well, one of the main reasons, which I'm sure is similar to most people that did stuff last year, is that the pandemic kind of shut down my work for a little while, and so I didn't just want to sit around doing nothing the whole time, and I thought about starting a channel previously, not necessarily for reacting, mainly for like Blu-ray collecting type stuff, because I like those videos too, but I just decided to go ahead and try it out, and surprisingly people were watching it, and so I just kept doing it, and now here I am. How many hats do you own, and are we ever going to see you without one? I think now I probably own between like 16 to 20 hats, maybe. I feel like my hats are like the way that I express myself most with my outfits, and so I've worn them for years, and it goes way back to when I was a teenager and stuff. And so I feel almost naked when I'm not wearing one. But if you want to see me without a hat, here is your one and only chance if you're ready for it. Is there a particular director on this channel who you've seen a fair amount of their films, who you are not a fan of? In other words, one that you felt that their style was not really your thing. I don't know if there's a director on the channel where I just straight up don't like their films, especially the ones that I've seen, but maybe the one who has the films that I don't like the most compared to everyone else is probably Guillermo del Toro. Nothing wrong with him as a filmmaker, but the movies that I've seen from him, specifically outside of the channel, I've never really enjoyed that much, but Pan's Labyrinth did surprise me with him, and so definitely changed my opinion a little bit. But I feel like compared to some of the other filmmakers like Wes Anderson or Tarantino, definitely does not stack up quite to that level for me personally. The only question worth asking, what is your favorite season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Well, for the entirety of the show, it really just feels like whatever season I've currently finished, because they just keep improving and improving, and there hasn't been a bad season yet in my opinion, but it's very difficult to rank which one is the best. I would probably at some point have to go through each episode individually and then compare the rankings together for seasons and see mathematically which is the best. I don't know if anybody asked this yet, but has there been a movie you've reacted to and said you liked, but you now don't like the movie anymore? That hasn't happened, but it has happened several times with the exact opposite, where I've liked a movie when I watched it the first time, but as I was editing it or thought about it more, it's really grown in my opinion. And I think maybe the biggest change that happened for a movie with me on the channel was when I watched Spirited Away, because it was my first interaction with that genre of film and that company, and so it was kind of a shock the first time I watched it, but afterwards, just thinking about it a lot more and editing it, it really grew on me a lot. And if any of you hearing that are thinking there's not a Spirited Away reaction on your channel, there used to be, as well as a Princess Mononoke, but I took them down just because of all the issues people were having with Studio Ghibli. But the full-length reactions are still on the Patreon, but I just don't feel comfortable putting the YouTube edits back up and risk getting the channel taken down, unfortunately. Would you consider reacting to more British content for your loyal fans across the pond? Of course, always looking to more good films from anywhere in the world, so if you have any recommendations, let me know. Do you still watch movies in your own time, or are your movie watching efforts completely dedicated to the channel now? For the most part, yes, most of my efforts are dedicated to the channel now, and the fact that any movie that I haven't seen is an opportunity for a video definitely makes that a little bit more difficult to watch stuff outside of the channel, but I still have watched a couple things, and especially will continue to go to the theater for kind of huge releases that I really want to see. Like, I just went to see A Quiet Place Part 2 in the theater, I saw Tenet in the theater, and I'm planning on going to see some other big releases like Dune and whatnot. So there's definitely a few movies that I am reserving for the theater experience, but for the most part, all on the channel. What first time reaction movie have you rewatched the most since your first reaction video to that film? Because my schedule is kind of time consuming, of my own fault for setting it up that way, I don't really have too much time to rewatch stuff outside of the channel, because usually if I'm not reacting to something outside of going to the theater for something, I'm not really focusing on TV or movies, just because I'm trying to relax my mind with other stuff. And so the only movie I've watched for the channel that I've rewatched outside of it has been Children of Men, but besides that, haven't had time or given myself the time to rewatch anything. What is the most emotional reaction you've had watching a movie? The Green Mile by far, not just for the channel, just in general. Never had a movie emotionally gut punch me quite in the way that that one did. Not sure what it was specifically compared to other movies, but just love the characters in that, and so it hit me extra hard. I was wondering, since I've seen a few YouTubers have their pets in their videos, if you have a pet, would you consider including your pet in your videos before watching the movies, TV shows? If you did, what would your pet be? I wish I was lucky enough to be able to do that, but currently I don't have any pets. Maybe if I move and I'm in a place where I can have pets, because I currently can't, then I would love to do that. But while I do love both dogs and cats, I definitely am more of a cat person. And so if there ever is a pet that pops up in the future, it's most likely going to be a cat. What is your criteria for deciding what you react to? Well, a majority of it is taken from recommendations both on YouTube and Patreon. Then I just pick a few, put it on a poll, and whatever wins the poll, I watch. But obviously, as I mentioned before, started doing things that just I personally have had my eye on for a while. Will you ever do anime films? For example, Perfect Blue, Your Name, A Silent Voice. Potentially. Obviously, I mentioned before about the copyright issues with Studio Ghibli, and so it just naturally makes me a little bit more hesitant to do any sort of other anime type reactions, but those are all movies you listed that I really wanted to check out, and so we'll see in the future if I feel comfortable enough to do it. But if you're interested, I do have reactions to obviously the two movies I mentioned before, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, as well as Akira, are on the Patreon as well. Do you ever feel like you have to force yourself to watch a movie or show? Up to this point, luckily, I've never gone into a movie dreading it, but the only time that I ever have to force myself to do something is just if I'm tired or mentally drained a particular day. And so if it's a tight work schedule, I just kind of have to buckle down and do it. But other than that, don't have too many issues as far as the content. Have you considered a fan meetup where a group could go to the movies with you and discuss the movie afterward? Maybe at some point down the road. That's never really crossed my mind up to this point, but definitely a cool idea. So I will remember that for the future if I ever do decide to move forward with that. Have you had a peculiar experience when it comes to watching a movie, recording, or editing one of your videos? I think the most peculiar experiences for me are what people's responses are to certain videos, whether it's the number of people that watch them or how people feel about my reaction to it, because sometimes I feel like I necessarily didn't have the best reaction to a particular movie or show, but people seem to really enjoy it, so I feel like I'm my own worst judge of what my own good content is. But I guess another one would be sometimes I watch a movie and think it's one of my favorites from the channel, and then not very many people watch it, and so I assume that's just because not a whole lot of people have seen it, but it might just be because my opinion differs a lot from other people. I feel like those are the most peculiar experiences for me. Has watching all these movies or shows for the first time changed your outlook on life at all? Or alternatively, have you been in any real life situations that caused you to reflect on something you'd seen? I don't know if it's necessarily changed my outlook on life, but I feel like my appreciation for film and the art of filmmaking has definitely improved since starting the channel, because whether it's films that I never would have gone to or watched originally, or just having to talk about it and explain my thoughts, I feel like has helped me in gaining a greater appreciation for film overall. And I feel like because it is my work now, I just generally during the day am thinking about films a lot more, or just having things happen and thinking it relates to something that I've watched like that. So nothing too major, but hopefully that answers your question. Been watching since the first Breaking Bad reaction. Love the channel. My question for you is, have you ever thought of doing a collab with someone like James vs. Cinema? Well, first of all, thanks for watching for so long, because the first Breaking Bad videos were a long time ago now, so I appreciate that you've been enjoying the channel up to this point, and absolutely would love to collab with people in the future, whether it's James vs. Cinema or the boys at Cinema Rules. So many great channels out there that I'd like to work with in the future, and so hopefully at some point we can make it happen. Have you ever planned to watch a film but scrap the video because the movie was bad? Nope, not yet, and I don't think that would ever happen, because even if the movie wasn't the best, I would have hopefully still gotten some good content out of it, and so wouldn't want it to go to waste. What has been the most requested movie or show that you haven't done yet? Probably The Sopranos. I feel like that's the most mentioned thing that I haven't watched yet, at least off the top of my head, and so definitely going to get to it eventually. What is a video you'd like to make that doesn't necessarily fit into the main reaction theme of your channel? It's still kind of movies and TV show related, but I definitely want to do some more either reviews or tier lists, or just different fun things relating to movies or shows. Even just more Blu-ray collecting stuff I think would be cool, but obviously been focusing a lot on the reacting lately, so hopefully I'll get time to spice things up a bit. Are movies getting better as the years move on, or have they plateaued? I feel like you could either be referring to, do they get better for me as I get older, as the years go by for me personally, or as just in general the years go by? And I feel like the answer to me personally would be they are getting better, just because of some similar reasons before. I feel like I appreciate film more and just get sucked into stuff more than I used to when I was younger, and can appreciate some more mature themes or anything like that. As far as the general years as they go by, I don't know exactly how to answer that. I feel like every year has some fantastic movies and some bad movies, and it's just some years are better than others, but I definitely think there's been plenty of amazing movies in the past 10 years, as there has been in decades past as well, and so I don't feel like movies are slowing down anytime soon. What film or TV series are you excited to start or continue? New seasons on the way. I'm really excited for The Boys Season 3, because the first 2 seasons were absolutely wild, and I feel like that show is one of the most unexpectedly great things to come out recently, and I feel like everything they do is always so unexpected, and the characters are so great that I can't wait to see where they go next with it. What film have you reacted to that surprised you the most? Might be 12 Angry Men, even though that's one of the highest rated movies of all time. For me, just knowing the age of the film and just not really hearing too much talk about it, it surprised me in how much I actually did enjoy it, that all the hype around it was accurate. So that might not be the best answer, since it already is a great film, but for me, I was probably the most surprised at how much I loved that after it ended. So I know that there's a lot of questions that I still haven't gotten to, but I feel like I've definitely underestimated the amount of time it takes for a video like this, and I think I was maybe a little bit too long-winded with some of the questions early on, but hopefully I've been able to answer a lot of your questions and giving you some insight into the channel, into myself, and hopefully I'll get the chance to do another Q&A video here before long, so I can get to more questions like that and get to some different topics and whatnot that weren't covered in this video. But I appreciate everyone who commented and asked me stuff, and of course all your involvement in the channel up to this point. For each and every one of you, appreciate your guys' support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and until then, peace.